Okay, I think we're ready to get started with our third session at the University of Iowa Senior College. Our ranks are holding very well. You've all returned for the third time. I know some of you, because of prior conflicts, you can't make it to all the sessions, but it's nice to see almost all of our chairs filled, and a few people are still coming in. Again, I'm Ben Kieffer of Iowa Public Radio. I hope you also listen to River to River, my noon show, Monday through Friday. We had a lively discussion. I heard some comments about that coming in today, 6 days out from the election. So a lot of activity. The passions run really, really high at this time, and especially with the latest twist in the campaign. So the next almost 2 hours. Let me run through a preview of what we would like to do. I want to start off by giving you your final homework. This one includes a prize, possibly. So it's very easy. Here's my email address once again, iprbenclass@gmail.com. And what I'd like to have you do is guess the Electoral College outcome. Down, not any ranges like between 280 and 300. No, that disqualifies you. There are prizes involved here. I'm going to convince some people at IPR that we need some IPR swag to hand out for winners. So that's my chore between now and then. So put down the number of electoral votes you see for each candidate. Yes, a question about that. Let me get the microphone over to you.
There was something on the news last night where neither one got to 270. What happens then?
Oh, boy. That should be the question you write down or ask to Hans Hassel, who will be with us from Cornell College in just a moment, okay? That's a great question, because we do have in Utah this candidate who may actually win Utah, who is neither of the major party candidates. So I think that's what you're talking about, right? Okay, so please do save that. So email me by Sunday, of course, by Sunday. By the end of Sunday, email me at that with your guess, and we'll see if we have one, two, or more winners. I guess I have to come up, the more winners, the more swag I have to come up with. But that's my problem. Okay, so today we're going to have our guest today, Hans Hassel, one of my favorite political analysts that we have on our shows, that we have so many good ones. He'll be joining us in just a few minutes, about a half an hour, and we'll talk with him for about 45 minutes and have him answer some of your questions as well. And I think B has been busy handing out note cards. If you don't have a note card, please raise your hand so that someone can get to you with a note card and you can write down a nice question for our guest. A reminder that these sessions are broadcast on Coralville's public access, but you can find them on YouTube. You're shaking your head, Eric. YouTube.com/CoralVision. Just look for Coralvision. That's that. If you just Google Coralvision, you'll land there, right? You won't get some dying coral reefs in the Bahamas or something like that. Okay. Coralvision. It only took me 3 sessions to get that right. Okay. We're going to see a couple more sort of highlights from caucus history, some pivotal years that I'm sure you'll remember. And after we talk with Hans Hassel, we'll have a little bathroom break, and then we'll come back and perhaps see some ads. I'd like to, this time or next time, preferably this time, have some of the ads. There's a real difference between the ads that you see from Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and we'll see if you can kind of pick apart what those differences are. But first of all, let's go to our homework from last week that many of you turned in. Thank you for that. And remember, kind of our theme for these sessions, at least my theme, is that we don't talk to each other anymore. We've self-segregated ourselves into our various groups, and we are living in neighborhoods that are a lot Republican or Democrat, or if we know I live on a little cul-de-sac. I know who the Democrats and Republicans are in my cul-de-sac, I'm pretty sure. I have a good guess. I think it's probably fair to say that you do too. And if you have that talk over the fence or about the lawnmower clippings actually going in your driveway when they shouldn't, you don't work politics into the discussion, hot button issue, especially at this time here. So what I asked you last time to do was to inhabit your political opposite, all right? To come up with a few lines in which you are your political opposite, and you try to convince someone to vote for Hillary Clinton if you're a Donald Trump fan, or vote for Donald Trump if you're a Hillary Clinton supporter. And so we've got some, we don't have time to obviously go through all of them, but some of the highlights, it was very good. You did a wonderful job, and some of these you'll see in their responses, very difficult to do this, right? Yes, heads nodding. This was very difficult. We don't want to even go there. It's like we don't want to understand the enemy, right? It's easier if you say, they're just stupid. How could they be so stupid, right? That's easier, right? It's much harder to say, well, they must have very good reasons. They've lived on this planet just like I have. They've lived in this country, in this state, just like I have. Why do they come to a conclusion I cannot possibly imagine? Okay, so as we ascertained with our survey, we turned in the anonymous survey, we already know that this class is majority Clinton supporters, minority of Trump supporters. That's also reflected here. So we'll have mostly a few highlights from those who are supporting Donald Trump in their political opposite mode. Here's one, and several of you had sort of little disclaimers on here. About it was very funny to go, but anyway, I won't. If anybody wants to read their own, please raise your hand right now, because otherwise, of course, it gives away your politics if you do. I don't see any takers, so I'm going to rinse the names off of these and go just for the content here. Here is someone who doesn't support Donald Trump, saying, you should vote for Donald Trump because he is a Washington outsider with no political experience and will bring a new way of thinking and negotiating to Washington. He will nominate conservatives to the Supreme Court, preventing liberal movements such as sexual and racial equality from destroying our Christian nation. He will cancel the Affordable Care Act, which is an unnecessary burden on productive citizens and rewards those who don't work. He will maintain our gun rights under the Constitution, preventing the government from taking over our lives. He will deport illegal immigrants, freeing their jobs to be filled by real Americans. He is willing to tell it like it is and will be a fierce negotiator in international affairs, keeping America strong. Okay? Pretty good job? Yeah? Overboard? Was there, in some of these, I sense, because if I'm put in that position too, you would think, I'm going to be a little snottier than I need to be. A little snarkier, no, we didn't mention. Okay, so let's go on to another one. Here's one of those little disclaimers that I mentioned before. Dear Ben, for our senior college homework this week, you asked us to submit an argument in favor of the presidential candidate we're least likely to vote for. For days, I kept saying, I just can't do it. But I finally realized that I needed to participate, so here it is. I have put it inside a quotation mark because if this should ever fall into the hands of the NSA or fall into the hands of WikiLeaks, I need to preserve some deniability. So here is this person's pitch for Donald Trump. You should vote for Donald Trump because he represents a break from the unimaginative and incompetent stranglehold both established parties have held on the federal government for many years. Pretty good, huh? I like that one. That is good. Offer some analysis. The good news is that Hillary Clinton will probably win the election. The bad news is that the Congress will not allow her to get very much done. right by that, more analysis. The bad news is that Donald Trump may still possibly win the election. The good news is that the Congress will not allow him to get very much done. Okay, here's one for Hillary Clinton that was by someone who was not for Hillary Clinton. In my career in social work, I interviewed and hired many people. I needed the right combination of experience and compassion to work with the families we served. To be successful, they would need to navigate and nurture delicate family relationships. Anyone can see that Hillary's extensive resume encompasses a wide variety of experiences in firm leadership with the right amount of compassion. I'm confident in her ability to navigate and nurture relationships both here and abroad that will bring leaders together for the greater good. Pretty fair. I like that one. Okay. Here's another one for Donald Trump from someone who is the political opposite of Donald Trump. Here's my argument for why a person should vote for Donald Trump. And then in parentheses, about the only sincere argument I can think of. Clinton is leading in the polls and may win the election because of big money, special influence peddling. She has recently raised and spent over $1 billion, while Trump numbers are exactly half. The differential early in the race was even larger in favor of Clinton. Plus, almost all of his early expenditures were self-funded. For example, he was not for sale to special interests, as is the case for Clinton. The state-level differential shows Clinton having 4 to 5 times more special influence and contributions and spending than Trump. What a way to buy an election. It was pretty good, huh? This was early on, especially in the primary. I can't be bought, right? And once we got into the general election phase, Donald Trump shifted his gears, and that wasn't heard as much. And he did generate a lot of contributions. In fact, when you see him before a podium in the last few days, you see the text, you see how you can contribute, just like a conventional political candidate. One more for Donald Trump. Vote for Donald Trump. He is a pro-lifer, pro-nationalist. He will protect jobs, protect borders. He is a pro. That person maybe went to the Iowa Writers' Workshop. It was rather poetic. Here's another pro-Trump from someone who is the political opposite of Donald Trump. You should vote for Trump because we need a leader who is a political outsider and not beholden to anyone's big money. He is financing his own campaign. Hillary is a criminal and not even qualified to run for public office. We need someone who can lead the Republican Party to take our country back. He will appoint constitutional scholars to the Supreme Court to restore our country's morals and not appoint activist judges leading us to further moral decay for generations to come. He's a successful businessman who will stop illegal immigrants crossing our borders and taking our jobs. He will return high-paying manufacturing jobs lost due to NAFTA. He will cut our taxes, decrease the wasted money spent on entitlements for non-citizens, protect our Second Amendment rights, and repeal Obamacare, which is a total disaster. Good job, huh? A lot of points there. Well, thank you. As I said, I don't have time to read a lot of all of the input, but thank you, bravo, for those of you who confronted your political opposite and inhabited that person's mind, however briefly that was to get this assignment done. Any thoughts on this? How challenging was the assignment? Would you like to offer your thoughts?
I found it very challenging. I'm a middle of the roader. You don't hear about us too often, so I struggle with both sides. This time I'm not struggling at all.
Did you to help you come up with the terminology to understand your political opposite or the person you would least likely vote for? Did you talk to someone in your circle of friends or acquaintances?
Well, in a sense, you said that we don't associate with those. I asked.
I didn't say you didn't. You couldn't. I just said it's your choice. It's a free country, right?
What I did was I asked the people I played tennis with, so I have no idea what their political views are. So I got Trump responses and I got Hillary responses, and I had some who said voting is a very private thing, and I don't think I want to share. And I had those who hadn't made up their minds. So.
Very good. Any other observations about this before we move on? B has a little microphone there too. Any other ideas? Okay. Well, at least perhaps an encouragement to understand the other side, to foster political discussions. This one just came out just yesterday, I believe. Also relevant to what we just did. A Pew poll. Almost 60% of registered voters who support Hillary Clinton say they have, quote, a hard time respecting someone who backs Donald Trump for president. 60% of registered voters who support Hillary Clinton. We could say that probably 60% in here who support Hillary Clinton would say, I have a hard time even respecting someone who says they support Donald Trump. For Trump supporters, they're not so judgmental, it turns out, if I can put it that way. For Trump supporters, 40% said they would have a hard time respecting someone who backs Hillary Clinton, just as a means of comparison. Okay, so we're going to get started with Hans Hassel in just a moment. Before that, we want to visit another pivotal course. This course is also about the Iowa caucuses, the role of the Iowa caucuses. We'll talk with Hans, as we have with all of our guests, about how this caucus season has fit into past ones. And so we want to go back to 1984 in this one and recall it. And it's an election and a caucus most everybody here participated in. So let's have a listen. Go back to 1984.
Former Vice President of the United States.
Ahead of the 1984 Iowa caucuses, former Minnesota Senator and Vice President Walter Mondale was the overwhelming favorite for his party's nomination. A Midwestern upbringing on the Iowa-Minnesota border only bolstered his caucus expectations.
Mondale's people were sort of in the same position Muskie was in 72. So the front runner, the head, got all the party poobahs, and yet they were really vulnerable.
If Mondale was to be the 1980s version of Muskie, what better man to pick up the 1972 playbook than former McGovern campaign manager, now Senator, Gary Hart?
There was never a time when I thought I would miraculously win the Iowa caucuses. What I was out to do was, to use a cliche of political journalism, do better than expected. And expectations in my case were so low that I didn't have to do very much.
As a candidate, I was always trying to knock down expectations. You know, I don't know how well I'll do it. 49% is way too high. But the press kept building it up.
How do you go about setting those expectations, and is that fair?
It's an imperfect process. There's no question about that, but I think that a kind of consensus is arrived at. Walter Mondale is saying publicly, I'll take any victory at all. I just want to do well there. If I win by 2 votes, that's a big victory. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people are saying that Walter Mondale will have to finish with about 45% of the vote.
I know the American people, and I am ready to be President of the United States.
Mondale for president.
Heavy expectations were weighing on Mondale's Iowa campaign. In fall of 1983, when political consultant Joe Trippi was drafted from the East Coast to take over Iowa operations, he found the side effects of perceived inevitability.
It was a disaster. He had been falling in the polls. The organization, people who had supported him, Iowans who supported him, had been calling the national headquarters saying something's wrong. It's just not, the organization isn't coming together. Almost this feeling of we couldn't lose, therefore there was no urgency.
Voters want to know that you want and need their help. And if you are kind of assuming the presidency, they don't get that sense. An equally formidable candidate in that field that people have forgotten about, one of the most popular Americans, John Glenn. So I not only had to compete with Walter Mondale, I had to compete with America's astronaut.
There you go. There you go. Yes, sir.
Polls currently put John Glenn second in the Democratic presidential race. With less than 2 weeks left before the Iowa caucus, he needs additional support. On this trip, he targets the farmer with the aid of the media.
Many of you have had a pretty tough time over the last few years.
This trip was carefully scripted out, moment by moment, to achieve the desired effect.
If you want to show that John Glenn is talking and listening and interested in what farmers have to say, then you take him and you walk him around the fields and have him feed the pigs and talk to farmers in the barn.
And if you've ever wondered why presidential candidates sit on bales of hay and ride tractors while in Iowa, it's because it's in the script. And when you talk to farmers, the script says, make the farmer look like a farmer.
I'm a neighbor, and I was just asked to come. And come in your coveralls.
And I got to say, John Glenn's still an old friend of mine. I thought that he came across flat in Iowa. He didn't really get organized there. It took a low voltage view of what he should do to do well in Iowa, and it didn't work at all. As a matter of fact, he slipped.
John Glenn was the candidate to challenge Walter Mondale, but instead his victory hopes deflated. He finished a dismal fifth.
When you end up in Motel 6 in Des Moines at midnight, you scratch your head and you say, what am I doing here? I'm a small town farm kid from Kansas. What am I doing here?
A lot of the media, I think, is disconnected from the communities. The big national firms that think they know what Iowans want, they may not know a damn thing about what Iowans want. So the one thing about Iowa, their system guarantees that you listen to what they've got to say.
We're going to move this caucus along because the media and everybody has their eyes on Des Moines, and they want this thing over by the time of the 10 o'clock news.
The next president of the United States, Walter Mondale.
Tonight is the beginning of the end of the Reagan administration.
The press wants to get high expectations so you don't quite make it, and then they've got a story about how you didn't quite do it, even though you won. So that's a game that goes on. That's not very edifying, in my opinion, but that's what happens.
Fritz Mondale, he can be inevitable. He can be all these things. We could win with 51. We could win with 48. Does it matter? In the end, great. We all knew you were the front runner. The real question we want to know is who's the other guy? And the other guy turns out to be Gary Hart. And once everybody knows that, that's the most amazing thing that comes out of Iowa is the other guy a lot of times, not the front runner.
But he got a little lift out of it and handled it very cleverly.
Okay, up until monkey business happened there as well. Remember that. I want to roll, because of time, I'm going to roll right into 1988 to get a look at the Republican side of that caucus, which is very interesting, and then we'll link up with Hans Hassel.
One of the difficulties we had in 1988 was portraying ourselves as agents of change when our candidate, George Bush, the vice president, had been Reagan's vice president for 8 years.
Whatever it is, competing with the Japanese, whatever it is education.
As he said when he declared a truce yesterday, I want to be the old George Bush. It may not be as interesting, and we kind of found that here today.
I voted about 11,000 times since I've been in the Congress. Well, I'd like to get rid of a few of those votes myself, but 11,000 times and a pretty consistent record.
So Senator Robert Dole and wife Elizabeth invited Barbara and Iowa Senator Charles Grassley to join the campaign.
Chuck normally stays out of primaries, but in '88 he decided to support me, which is a big boost.
I mean, those of us that are doing the endorsement say, boy, we're really helping this guy. I think we have an over-exaggerated opinion of our endorsement because Iowans are very independent people. I think it might influence a few people, but it isn't going to make a big difference.
I guess one of us will be here.
one of the three of us or four of us. I mean, we're all going to be out here working. So we got a pretty good team. There would not have been a farm bill had it not been for the efforts of Bob Dole. Now, if you don't like that, then you're mad at me. But if you think it's a little better than what we had, just go to the caucus and say, I think we have a friend of the farmer in Senator Bob Dole, and that's an accurate statement. First year of the bill, 46%.
As Bob Dole locked up the rural vote, Vice President Bush was about to be ambushed in Ames. The Republican Cavalcade of Stars in 1987, better known as the Ames Straw Poll, was the canary in the coal mine for establishment Republicans and the rise of evangelicals.
For the last 7 years, I've stood side by side with one of the greatest presidents this country's had, and I'm very, very proud of that.
We indeed are going to come once again to a time in our nation and throughout the world when the term "Made in America" is synonymous with the very best in the world.
So the room was packed with our people, and they were wearing those hats with Robertson for president on them. And I was hugging all these wonderful people, and, they took a vote. And I really didn't understand what they were doing. But when it was finished, I had won decisively, and George Bush was creamed. I mean, he really was beaten badly in those straw ballots, and the people were shocked. But I really didn't understand what the game was. I didn't know what they were doing.
But I do remember the morning after the straw poll, the Des Moines Register had a big cartoon, and it had a cartoon picture of David and Goliath, and portraying Pat Robertson as David and George H.W. Bush as Goliath, you know.
His face was shocked. I mean, I remember just looking. I mean, I went up and shook his hand. Hi, George. We were friends, and he had that shocked look. He was horrified after that Ames straw poll. He couldn't believe it.
At that particular time, I never saw the dominance of evangelical Christians within the Republican caucus. And now, since then, it's been very much demonstrated.
Mr. Pat Robertson.
Which says a lot about the rise of evangelical voters as a bloc in Iowa, and to some extent in the Republican Party. I mean, Pat Robertson was a televangelist. Talk about the ultimate outsider.
Neil Bush, who's President H.W. Bush's one of his sons, had referred to Robertson supporters and or organizers as cockroaches. And I was with Pat kind of behind the stage before this event. Of course, he wanted to come out with both barrels and basically, give the Bush campaign a piece of his mind. But more rational heads prevailed and encouraged him that wasn't the thing that he should do,
I had one little woman look at me with just hatred in her eyes. Say, "Why don't you get out of the race? Why are you here?" I mean, just vitriol. But, that's politics.
I want a time in America when husbands love their wives, when wives love their husbands, and when men and women together bring up law-abiding, God-fearing children as citizens of the greatest nation on the face of the earth.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is about 5 degrees below zero with the wind chill. There are 3,000 frozen media members in downtown Des Moines, and there are enough satellite dishes in this town to dial up Mars. It can only mean one thing. It's Iowa Caucus Night! Let's party! Hooray!
Bob Dole would claim first on the Republican side, but his victory was overshadowed by an evangelical awakening. Second place, Pat Robertson, claimed his own victory.
I believe after this win in Iowa, I'm going to be coalescing the conservatives. Many of the Reagan supporters around the country will be coming over to my campaign.
Big headlines. I mean, I'm talking about banner headlines across the country. It was remarkable. Robertson beats Bush. That was the story, because that meant Bush came in third, and this unknown preacher beat him.
The vice president's eldest son conceding on behalf of his father, but with still a vision of optimism.
And we look forward to the South. A little different environment there. A place where his loyalty with the president will be a plus.
George H.W. Bush would regain his footing, and later the presidency. When his son George W. would return for his own campaign a decade later, he would learn from Robertson's evangelical outreach and message, engaging Iowa Christian conservatives as a cornerstone of his own campaign.
Okay, very interesting. Not too long ago, and so we have the Christian conservatives very much a part of the Iowa caucuses since then, remembering that time. I don't think there's another candidate since Bob Dole who has, while campaigning, referred to himself in the third person. I think he kind of got rid of that trend. Let's try to get in touch with Hans Hassel of Cornell College and talk with him about this primary season. Try to expand that out there. We went right through to you. Hello, Hans, right in your office there at Cornell College in Mount Vernon. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
I want to turn the laptop here briefly so you can see the multitudes here tuning in to you. Wave, everybody, please. Say hi. Thank you for joining us, Hans, from your office via Skype. It's wonderful we can do this, and wonderful that you've made time for us. So we've been, of course, this course is about reviewing the Iowa caucuses and how this caucus season has fit into prior seasons. We've been reviewing some wonderful Iowa Public Television mini documentaries on the various highlights of the seasons. We just were in 1988, where the rise of the Christian conservatives. We had Pat Robertson really come out of nowhere and not win the Iowa caucuses, but make a name for himself, and that's what the press was concerned about. But anyway, I wanted to talk with you about that. And we'll have some questions from our audience a little bit later. But to start off, let's start off with the latest revelations, because people are here. The Democrats in the audience have been doing, their hands are so sore from all the hand-wringing they've been doing that they would like a political expert such as yourself to kind of give us your reading on the impact of James Comey's announcement, which was incredibly vague, but there you have it, and how that will impact the race now with 6 days to go.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely spiced things up a little bit in terms of what where the news is, and perhaps made Democrats a little bit more anxious about what's going to happen. I think that it doesn't do a whole lot in terms of changing the outcome of the race. I think what it probably does is make some Republicans more enthusiastic and perhaps drive turnout among Republicans up a little bit. But at the same time, I also think it heightens concerns among Democrats that this election might be closer than they thought it would be. And so what they thought was in the bag, and all of a sudden you have this new revelation, maybe that makes them a little bit more motivated to get out at the polls. So I think in essence what it is primarily a wash, and I don't see it fundamentally changing the state of things more than perhaps a percentage point, and that's not nearly enough to put Donald Trump over the top here.
Mm-hmm. There's been a controversy over whether the FBI director should have taken this step. Is there any written rule about when you can introduce such things before an election? How close to an election?
I think that's more precedent. So I'm probably not the best person to talk about that specifically. I'm not an expert on bureaucratic politics.
Okay.
But I mean, reading the news, I get the sense that it's slightly unprecedented. It's not the normal, especially when it seems like they had very little information about what was actually in those emails, and there had been no formal indictment or anything like that. And so I suspect that this has been the pushback is because Democrats feel that this is unprecedented in terms of what he's announcing and the amount of information that he actually had at the time when he wrote that letter to Congress. And so I think it's unprecedented. I don't think it's necessarily unethical, but at the same time, I think that there are others that say he's not following precedent, and that's not favoring the particular outcome that we want, and that's exactly what they're trying to prevent.
Of course, in hindsight, if Donald Trump pulls out a victory here against defying the polls, it will be seen in probably a different light. It will be given a greater importance.
Yeah, that could be. I don't see that happening. I don't think that's given the state of the race with such little time left. I'd be hard pressed to see that actually happening.
So the reason too there is you just see Clinton supporters not being swayed, Trump supporters perhaps being made a little bit joyous, celebratory, salivating, but not really growing in their size, the number?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this is going to change people's perceptions of either Clinton or Trump. I think that most people that had made decisions were already aware of that information about Clinton's emails. And so it's not really a new information that might change people's opinions. It just might make things more salient. And when you make things more salient, what you do is you drive up the kind of the motivation to participate, right? So Trump supporters are reminded about this the scandal, and they say, oh, it's really important now that I get out and vote. Rather than focusing on the nature of the race, I'm going to focus on the things that I care about. But at the same time, right, it drives the support up among the participation among Trump supporters, but it also makes Democrats anxious and concerned about the outcome of the race, and so I think it drives up support among them as well. So I'm not sure that this has a major overall effect that is necessary to change the outcome here.
Any possible effect that you can see on those who had planned to vote for third-party candidates?
I think that might be the case, but that you might see a little bit more. I think that the largest effect will probably be in some place like Utah, where you actually have a third-party candidate who is receiving a sizable proportion of the vote. Right, so Evan McMullin is polling in line with Donald Trump there, and that might be the kicker for some Republicans in Utah, saying we don't want to be the state that throws the election to Hillary or throws the election to the House of Representatives because Trump can't get X number of votes, and that's going to change what happens. But by and large, I think that's if we're talking about Utah being the swing state in an election, we're talking about really unlikely outcomes here.
Yeah, we had a question though before class time started. That's why I'm getting up here, Hans. Gene had a question exactly about the Utah factor.
So, if neither Trump nor Hillary Clinton gets the 270 required electoral votes, what happens to the election?
So if the election were to come down with both major party candidates receiving less than 270 votes, and some third-party candidate, in this case Evan McMullin in Utah, receiving a small number of electoral votes, the election would actually be thrown to the House of Representatives. So you would not have, neither candidate would win in the Electoral College, and the Constitution dictates that if neither candidate wins a majority of the Electoral College votes, it's decided then by the House of Representatives, and specifically the House of Representatives that is elected in this November. So if Republicans maintain their majority in the House, it would be likely, and this is where we're not entirely sure, it would be likely that it would be a Trump presidency in that case, unless you have a big enough division within the Republican Party that Republicans would, these individuals that have said they will never vote for Trump really do never vote for Trump, and thus, right, neither Hillary Clinton nor Donald Trump wins a majority of votes in the House of Representatives. And then we get into this really odd circumstance where there needs to be some sort of negotiation or compromise. Perhaps perhaps Evan McMullin ends up being the consensus candidate. And this is the other weird thing, is that you cannot introduce some additional candidates into this mix. It has to be one of those three that received electoral votes to be. Those are the only individuals that can be considered in the House of Representatives. So they can't all of a sudden say, we really like Paul Ryan to be president and vote for Paul Ryan. No, it has to be one of those three individuals that received electoral votes.
Okay, signal if you have a question for Hans. We'll get to that. Perhaps if you want to voice yours yourself. Otherwise, please hand your card to B, I guess, and B is going to put it right on the corner of my desk here so that we can ask those in a few minutes. But the theme for this particular session, Hans, is to talk about new things that you've seen turn up here in this election cycle. And wow, we have a huge basket full of new things. The most unconventional election season, I guess, in
we
our
could say
living.
a basket of new deplorables. Is that the correct phrase here?
So start us off. What's at the top of the list when you say what's new, what this election is going to be known for in terms of campaign tactics, differences compared to past elections?
There are a couple of things I think that are unique about the 2016 presidential elections. I think you have to start with the primary. The consensus among political scientists had been that party elites coordinate, and that coordination in the invisible primary leading up to the Iowa caucuses, that time in November and December and that previous summer, is really what drives the outcomes of the nomination process. That party elites negotiate between themselves and discuss, in an informal way about which candidate they think would best unite the party and also be the most viable candidate in the general election. And the consensus has been that the party elites are generally able to do this, that they're able to coordinate. And you saw this fairly clearly on the Democratic side, where party elites very quickly coalesced around Hillary Clinton. And even though Bernie Sanders was able to generate a lot of support outside the party among young voters and others, it was really the party elites that controlled that nomination process and were able to lend a whole bunch of resources and a variety of other things to Hillary Clinton that enabled her to win that nomination process. On the Republican side, the unique thing is that you don't see this coordination, right? You see about 5 different candidates that the party elites viewed as acceptable, but an inability to coordinate between them, right? Was it Chris Christie? Was it Marco Rubio? Was it Jeb Bush? Was it John Kasich? And basically, because of that inability to coalesce around those two candidates, you end up with Donald Trump, who is the epitome of an outsider candidate, and Ted Cruz, who is largely disdained by most of the Republican establishment. And so that's the interesting thing to me is that what we see here, I think, is this the inability to coordinate, where previously parties have been able to coordinate particularly well. And what's the reason for that? I think that's the interesting discussion that I'd be interesting to talk about. Mm-hmm. Some of the other things I think are really interesting about changed the nature of this race of 2016 compared to previous elections is the use of explicit racial appeals in ways that we previously had not seen. Previously, when candidates wanted to appeal to racial sentiments, they would use dog whistles. They'd use signals or cues that their supporters could pick up and would be seen as evidence that this candidate supports my particular policies and supports my particular views on kind of race and race relations. But it would not be explicitly broadcast because there is some sort of social norm and social expectations about the use of race in campaigns, and that's been we've seen very explicit references to Mexican Americans, to African Americans in ways that we have not seen in previous presidential election cycles. And so there's some discussion about what is the issue of race become much more become less politically taboo, and things that candidates could not say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years, 20 years ago. Now all of a sudden they can say and can say it in ways that really resonate with a particular party's base. Mm-hmm. I think those are the two things that really stick out to me as changes in this election.
And related to what you just said, Hans, it occurs to me, we in journalism certainly noticed early on because we had this pattern of covering political candidates, and if you cover a political candidate and you go from stump speech to stump speech, you hear basically the same thing from town to town, and so what you become fixated on as a reporter is what is different, because that is what the news business is. You're pointing out what is different, but also what is the gaffe. What is the potential thing here that is damaging to the candidate that may slip out of the mouth? Now, interesting here, to piggyback on your remark about certain groups that were remarked on by Donald Trump, is that early on we expected this gaffe from day one, from his announcement. That is where the Mexican remark about rapists, drug dealers, and maybe a few good people came out, and we say, my unbelievably, this is a huge gaffe. But then, wouldn't you say something different here is this candidate doubled down, would not take back. Did he take back anything he said? No. Was that effective?
Yeah, so this is
obviously
this is what's interesting about political science theory, is that we've long held that there's this kind of implicit, explicit model of kind of racial cue giving, that candidates are allowed to talk about racial topics as long as the cues that they give and the language that they use is not explicit, right? You don't talk about reparations for slavery. You talk about needing to bring up the lower class or those that are struggling or things like that. You don't talk about race explicitly. Right, the classic example is the Willie Horton ad in the George H.W. Bush campaign in 1988, where he highlights criminality and uses the image of Willie Horton, who was African American, right? To this queuing up supporters to view Bush as tough on crime, but also tough on African American thugs in that way, and that was a kind of a dog whistle to those individuals who had those particular views on race. Right? If he had gone out and said, blacks are criminals and we need to work to make sure that these criminals don't yada yada yada, and Mexicans are rapists, right? That's the type of thing that would have been called out and would have put off a lot of potential supporters, and. So the theory was that these implicit racial appeals are effective, but only when they're implicit, right? Only when they don't raise up social norms about behavior. And this election has brought to the forefront that perhaps that's no longer the case, right? This may have once been the case in the 1980s and 1990s, but that doesn't seem to be the case now, where candidates are just as able to effectively use explicit racial appeals in ways to bring on supporters,
or maybe challenge you there. One specific candidate is able to do this. What stands out about Hillary Clinton in the gaffe category? You just referenced it. Deplorables, basket full of she had to step back from that, right? So is it now all candidates can do that, or just this singular one named Donald Trump?
I think it's I'm talking about race here. I don't think that the basket of deplorables is a racial. Right. Context, and I think that's the difference. And the basket of deplorables also includes many individuals who are fit the stereotype of American, right? White, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, right? They're not different. They're not ideologically different, or they're not demographically different from what many white Americans consider to be the norm, right? So you're grouping that particular that group of people into this deplorable basket, right? Well, I think it's what I'm talking about here specifically is the use of race, right? I think gaffes still play a role, but I think that perhaps the explicit use of race is no longer a gaffe, right? That's the difference, right? There still are gaffes, and gaffes continue to play a role in campaigns, but I think that right, explicit racial appeals are no longer considered gaffes by a certain subgroup of the population that that drive support among Republicans.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I mentioned your title at the beginning, Hans, before we get to questions. Assistant Professor of Politics at Cornell College in Mount Vernon, and always delighted to have you on Iowa Public Radio. One of really most exciting political analysts we have here, and part of the new generation. We have several veterans there, but you were really on your game, and we appreciate having you on Iowa Public Radio, as I know many of the listeners do. We have a lot of questions here. I can see at least 8 in front of me right now on note cards. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask your question yourself, and we can get to you with the microphone. Otherwise, I'll go ahead with this. Let me step up right over here. Hans, you won't be able to see this, but let's go to Lucy.
I wanted to follow up on the 270 split. How likely is that to happen?
Oh, I think it's pretty unlikely. I'm not a I don't do forecasts and models the same way that Nate Silver does, but I think he's pegged it around a 5 or 6% chance. It's fairly unlikely, right? First of all, you've got to have Evan McMullen win Utah, and right now projections, I think they're show him at a reasonable chance, but by no means a sure shot. And second, you've got to have Utah be the deciding vote, right, that keeps both Trump and Hillary from reaching 270, and that right now is also unlikely. It's more than likely that Hillary Clinton will, easily surpass 270 votes without Utah. And so that was never in her calculation of winning anyway. So you basically have to have Trump come back a major comeback in the next 6 days, and then to have that in the state of play. So I don't think that that's particularly likely that we're going to get to that constitutional outcome.
Okay, Hans, we have a question from way back in the back of the classroom. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned gaffes in political commentary, and nobody ever went there or said these things. What changed? Why is this okay now? And why is it okay for a white male, but not a white female? And then the other side, my question is, why isn't the press fact-checking like they used to do?
Oh, okay.
So your last question, I think you have to ask that to Ben, right? I think that's
yes, I represent all the press, so I'll take all your complaints and thrashings after class. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure that that's necessarily accurate. I have not seen any good information on whether or not fact checking has gone down or up recently. I would actually think that there's more fact checking. But there are still lots of statements that candidates say that are not, that are no longer, there are many things that fact checkers can't fact check. There are not enough hours in the day, unfortunately, to fact check all of the statements that candidates make. But back to your question about why is this why are racial gaffes no longer gaffes anymore? And I think there are a variety of theories about why that is. Part of that. So some theories have argued that it's because of an Obama presidency, that because we see an African American in the White House, this norm that African Americans or other minority groups are at a disadvantage and thus need to be respected has disappeared. Right? If we have this individual in the highest office of the United States, then race no longer becomes something that we need to be careful about. Or something that we no longer need that no longer divides us. And so I think that the perception perhaps is that it no longer needs to be an issue because of Obama's achievement in getting to the White House. But I think that that's one explanation. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I think another explanation might be that for a long time, conservatives have used dog whistles, not necessarily because they themselves were racist, but because they had principles, ideological principles that supported these particular actions. Right? You look at Barry Goldwater's Southern strategy, his opposition to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. That was not because Goldwater was explicitly racist, but because he had certain ideological principles about limited federal government and other things like that that suggested to him that this was an overreach of federal, federal power. And so this was this marriage between political conservatives and kind of the racially motivated Southerners was always an awkward marriage, where there was one group that was leading, that was using these signals, but not necessarily because they had these explicit views on race, but because these were generally the ideological principles that they have. And my experience, speaking with many political elites in the Republican Party, is that most of these political elites don't have these racially motivated principles. It's the voters that make up that party's coalition that have that. And so you had this weird, awkward coalition of conservatives who were not willing to talk about racial issues because they themselves didn't view it as a racial issue. They viewed it as an ideological issue. And so I think in the last 15, 20 years, you've started to see individuals come up from that segment of the political coalition and make their way into the political elite, or in the case of Donald Trump, right, run for president even without support of that political elite. And so that party structure that for a long time has kept that as a gaffe is no longer kind of restricting that as a gaffe or recognizing that as a gaffe. So I think it's a fundamental change in the makeup of the party leadership within the Republican Party that has caused this as well.
Right. I think it's an interesting point you make, Hans, about the political candidates not necessarily, they're standing for certain positions on issues, but not necessarily believing their personal beliefs. They're going along with the base of the party. One of the examples that is most stark for me is what science has to say about climate change. Climate change, overwhelmingly by scientists, climatologists, people who study these things, 99% plus say this is happening and this is caused by human action. But that is not the case in our political sphere. Now, you will back me up or not on this, Hans, but a lot of those, if you will get very cagey if you ask them about climate science, they will not want to express a belief that they may have because it doesn't fit with their base.
Yeah, no, politicians are electorally minded, right? That's their job, right? They are representatives of their constituents. And so while they may not necessarily have those same beliefs, they are representing their constituents, and they want to try to win re-election, and that's the means by which they do it. And that's right. That's part of our democratic process, right? We expect representatives to be representative of their particular constituents. And
right. But it's one thing if they're upfront about it, and some do. Some say, now, I'm going to pay attention to my electorate. I don't believe this. Tim Kaine, for instance, on the issue of abortion, perhaps, is a good example here. He says, as a Catholic, I don't happen to believe this, but I represent people, so this is my stance, right? I think that maybe I'm misinterpreting. We have a lot of questions, not much time left. I want to go rapid fire through these questions and get to the nugget of your answers quickly, Hans, because otherwise I'll have people here not just getting after me about fact-checking as a representative of the media. They'll be like, I didn't get my question answered. Okay, so a couple of questions actually ask an interesting question that I haven't heard discussed. This questioner says, I just became aware that 7 states allow revote if voting early. Is there a possibility of revotes affecting the outcome? Do you know anything about this, Hans?
Well, so some states allow you to cast another ballot, which would cancel out your previous ballot. So it's basically that some people are able to change their mind if they want to change their mind. My suspicion is that this is probably not a large impact on the outcome of an election, right? What's the probability of one ballot affecting the outcome of the election? It's pretty small, and so you'd have to have a large proportion of people changing their ballot up until election day for this to matter. I think it's an interesting characteristic of certain states' electoral rules, but I'm not sure that it has a large effect on outcomes per se.
A couple of questions here think there's a sort of imbalance in how we treat Trump, false equivalency or not covering Trump in the way that they would like, it seems. Why do we keep hearing about emails but not about Trump's legal problems, rape, fraud? The other question closely related, how can Trump keep bringing out the facts, in quotation marks, about Hillary and yet keep from disclosing his taxes and other good or bad business deals. Is this something is this a media failure here that we're raising those and saying, well, we've said something bad about this person, so the media says we have to have balance, so we have to say something bad about that person too, and put them on the same platform?
I think a lot of this is the perception of what information you want to see. I think that our perceptions of what's being covered are often shaped by our biases. So if I have a conservative bias, I'm going to feel that the liberal media is not covering Hillary Clinton as they ought to, and if I have a liberal bias, I'm going to say that they're not covering Trump as they need to. And so part of this is built into the system, built into our perceptions. Right, this is how we're hardwired to perceive things. Right, this is called motivated reasoning. Right, that we rationalize what's happening in connection to our perception of the world, right? So when we get information that may not align with our perception of the world, we discount it or we change what we perceive. And so I think that part of this is what those questions are, right? That's just part of human nature that we motivate, we reason. Our reasoning is not totally perfect, right? We see things as we want to see them, or things that we view as unfair. Right, and perhaps this also has a bearing on the fact-checking question, the assault on the media, if I can put it that way. No, just joking. I think perhaps, I don't know, early on, Trump was treated as a joke, and so perhaps was not vigorously fact-checked to the degree that he has in the last few months. But also, I feel, as a journalist in the media, that sometimes I want to say, the facts are out there, folks. Do you need a spoon to be fed these facts? And also what you just said, Hans, and I think you may have mentioned this in one of our shows on Iowa Public Radio, that to someone who is a convinced and impassioned supporter of Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or whomever, facts do not get in the way of their passion for that person. And that's just what you were saying, right, Hans? Yeah, no, I mean, you look at change after the Access Hollywood tape came out among Republican support of Donald Trump, and it went down slightly, but it was still 80%, 90% of Republicans were supporting Donald Trump, and that's just standard motivated reasoning that we discount facts that disagree with us, with our perceptions of how things are, right? So if we get new information and it disagrees with our old information, we're more likely to discount it unless we get an awful lot of new information and then maybe we'll start to consider. But one piece of information is not enough to reach that tipping point that's going to cause us to all of a sudden reevaluate the perceptions and our opinions. Maybe that's something that has changed. We watched 1984. We watched the candidate Gary Hart. One piece of information, 2 words: monkey business. That boat and. But I think that tipped it in a primary, at least. Yeah, that's also different. You're eliminating party cues there, right? So the information in a general election, right? If this information had come out about Donald Trump during the primaries, this would have been much more damaging. But now in a general election, when you've got one Republican and one Democrat, you're much more likely to discount information about your Republican candidate because you have nowhere else to go, right? You don't have any other viable options. You can't accept the Hillary Clinton. You've already walked down the aisle and you've been pronounced man or woman and party. So. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's that sort of thing. Okay, a lot of questions to get through, and we'll get through these from our audience here. Here's a question from the audience. I say audience; these are class members, I guess. I don't know. What changes do you foresee happening with the Iowa caucuses? Good question. That's a good question. I think that the concern always in Iowa is does Iowa become less relevant? And I think that there's something to be said that I think the concern is, are candidates going to spend less time here? I mean, has Iowa become less relevant in the fact that it has not necessarily chosen a winner in recent election cycles, and so that's the question, right? At what point does this become less of a place where presidential candidates are made? And I think that's the concern. I think that I think that it will continue to hold its place in the first of the nation. I think that you'll continue to see candidates come here. I think I worry from an Iowan perspective of what relevance does our vote have in helping winnow the field more and helping provide clear perspectives as to who the preferred candidate should be, and I think that's the concern as to what not just is Iowa going to be first and stay first, but what's its role in this process of winnowing and choosing a presidential nominee.
Next question, will Democratic and Republican parties be forced to regroup or reorganize after 2016 to survive? So that all depends on the outcome, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that Republicans are probably, we see those divisions within the Republican Party a lot more clearly than we do among the Democratic Party, right? Even after, right, parties are coalitions of different policy demanders, right? You've got different groups on each side, right? You've got evangelical Christians on the right, you've got economic conservatives, you've got war hawks, you've got this coalition of groups that have different demands and interests and policies that they really care about. And the split in the Republican Party among that coalition seems to be much greater than it is among Democrats, right? It's definitely there among Democrats. But that coalition that supported Bernie Sanders as opposed to Hillary Clinton has largely, gotten back into reintegrated with the party, and you see a fairly united Democratic Party. That's not so clear on the Republican Party, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Right? Is this going to be a bull moose party type of thing, similar to 1912, right, where that faction eventually realigns into the progressive Democrats? Right? How is that? How is that going to play out in the next couple of years? I think the Republicans have perhaps a bigger problem about figuring out how to bring that coalition together again.
If Donald Trump should defy polls and win, I've heard it expressed that Donald Trump would have taken over the Republican Party. To what degree would you agree with that?
Yeah, presidents have huge effects on the ideological makeup of the party, right? They set the brand. And I think that would have a huge. I think the realignment process would be much quicker. He would cause certain segments of the population to exit very quickly out of out of the party. Whereas when he loses, there's not clear leadership within the party. Right, a Speaker of the House or a Senate Majority Leader does not have that same bully pulpit as the president does, and so it makes it harder to definitively define where the party is going. And so I think that Trump winning would actually make that realignment process much quicker. Whereas now there's going to have to be continued negotiations and interactions within the party as that party tries to balance the various coalitions that make it up.
Another question: is there any serious talk about getting rid of the Electoral College?
No.
Okay. Next question, if that's dispensed with. What do you predict will be the one most critical swing state?
In this election, I think. So I think that there are states that are going to be interesting and close, and then there are states that are crucial for one party or the other to win. I think the states that are close, you're looking at Ohio, North Carolina, Florida. Right, those are the states that are close in this election and will be close.
Iowa too?
Sorry, what?
Iowa as well?
Iowa as well, yes. In terms of critical to the election and critical to the election of either candidate, I think you look at Nevada. I think you look at Pennsylvania. Right, both states are very clearly in Democratic hands right now with polls, and so I think that if we're looking for an outcome of the election, I would watch those states and see what happens there.
This questioner asks, would you please discuss our vice presidential candidates and their ability to lead our country?
Oh, this is a great example of how little vice presidential candidates matter. That me as a political expert has very little knowledge of either Mike Pence or Tim Kaine. I mean, they both have experience as governors. Both have been in Washington as senators. So I think that they definitely have the political acumen and the experience to. Right, and they're both more experienced than Gerald Ford was when Gerald Ford was appointed vice president and then eventually became president. So I think if we can survive a Gerald Ford presidency, I think that if either one of these two presidential candidates were deemed unfit for office for one reason or another, I think that those two candidates would probably fill that void fairly well. They would play they would play a role in shaping where the party goes, and that's important to understand where they're coming from. But in reality, vice presidential candidates matter very little. Why? Because they have no extensive constitutional roles, and second, because they generally don't affect electoral outcomes a whole lot. At most, a vice presidential candidate may affect the vote in their home state, right? So Indiana all of a sudden becomes a little bit more safe for Republicans. And Virginia gets a bump for Democrats. But other than that, they have a very limited impact on the electoral outcome.
Question, what if Trump doesn't concede if he loses? What happens?
If he doesn't concede, we proceed down the normal constitutional route, which is that electors would cast their ballots in January, and the outcome of that electoral college process would dictate the outcome of the election. In order for him to have that overturned, if he doesn't get the result that he wants, he would have to litigate in a variety of different states. And it would probably unlikely that those litigation efforts would succeed at any chance. And so I think that the more damaging aspect is the trust that he puts in the electoral system. I think it would be much worse, right? If we're talking about threats to democracy, much worse would be if a party in power says that they are not going to abide by the election results, right? So if President Obama had said, "I'm not going to abide by the election results and I'm going to stay in office for another 4 years," right? Then that becomes, right, when we eliminate this democratic transition of power, which is fundamental to our democratic process. Mm-hmm. Here, what you've got is a party outside of government being upset about the outcome, but you're not changing a balance of power, or you're not changing a transition of power here. The outcomes have dictated what the result should be, and that institutional process will proceed as the Constitution dictates.
Okay, this will have to be the last question. Closely related, what will Trump do politically if he loses? What political power does he have?
That's a great question, right? So in my research, I look at the ability of parties to control primary elections, primarily focusing on the state and the House level. And parties are very effective at doing this. And one of the reasons they're effective at doing this is that they are able to convince candidates to seek other office because they view the party as the avenue to political power. Donald Trump, I don't think, has had any other interest in political power outside of being president. He's interested in influencing outcomes and being a large personality in the political sphere. But I don't think he has any other political ambitions besides being president. I don't think that he will say, "Oh, I've lost, I'm going to go run for Senate." I think that he will continue to try to influence politics as he can. I'm not sure that he will continue to have that same following if he loses badly, and that's the other thing. I think that party followers may eventually recognize that this was perhaps not the best candidate they could have nominated, and thus his following may decrease over time. Right? You think about the relevance that Mitt Romney has in the current Republican Party. It's still there, but it's not by any means this large presence. And I think that Donald Trump will most likely go the way of other failed presidential candidates, Michael Dukakis and others that were not, in national government.
Mm-hmm. Before we go, after we talk with you, we're going to finish up our session here after we've said goodbye to you. And I wanted to comment on the ads that we've seen in this political election. We're going to be comparing some Hillary Clinton ads with some Donald Trump ads. And I'd just like to get your general insights as to the ads that you've seen coming out of these political campaigns.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting if you look at what the ads are trying to do. The traditional narrative is that negative advertising is best done by outside groups because there isn't a negative backlash against the candidate for running that advertising, and that's not what you've seen here, and I think that's very interesting. I think part of that reason is that one, Trump is trying to motivate a base of supporters here. I still think that he is in somewhat of a primary election mode where his base is to motivate and turn out those core supporters that are strongly on his side. The other aspect about Hillary Clinton's negative advertising on Donald Trump is that it's not anxiety based. It's based on it's on morals and perceptions, and she uses many of his own words against him in a way that doesn't necessarily cause that same backlash that normal negative advertising would have, where things are stretched and truths are not exactly done in a perfect way. And I think that using his own words in context is particularly effective there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hans Hassel, thank you very much for joining us from your office in Mount Vernon at Cornell College. We've enjoyed it immensely to have you part of our University of Iowa Senior College class. Thank you for making time for us. And now I'm going to turn the laptop so you can receive the generous applause of the audience here.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Very good. Take care until next time, Hans. We appreciate it. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Okay. We're going to take a short break now and come back and see some of the ads from the campaigns. And I'm sure you've seen some of those on TV. Perhaps you're a cable cutter. You haven't been watching TV, and you'll see some of these for the first time. So let's take a 10-minute break. I've got to do some things here. So if you want to talk about something with me personally afterwards, let's wait until after the session. But let's take a break until about 5 till. Okay? Thanks. In the break, this is very interesting. I wanted Eric to get this on our broadcast here. This is Bill. Raise your hand, Bill. There you are, Bill. Bill brought this up, and you had this as a gift from someone, or
from my grandson. I bought it as a birthday gift for my grandson.
You bought it as a birthday gift for your grandson, and now his you don't have to say. You can choose not to decide. Is he a Trump supporter?
He's probably not, but he's too young probably to really have a view.
Okay. So this is Trump the game. And as Bill pointed out to me, it's not whether you win or lose, but whether you win. That is up there right at the top. So we have that right there. Thank you for bringing this in. When we think about other products connected with I remember from my teens, actually, we got a 6-pack of Billy Beer. Remember that? From Jimmy Carter's brother. Well, I don't know if it was actually somebody capitalized. I don't know if it was. Here's the game board, so we move around there as well. But thanks for bringing that in, Bill. Didn't even know we were going to have a show and tell part of this class. Let's watch some of the ads, and there's a point that, let's see, I want to go to this one right here. I think if this is the right one here. So we're going to watch a few of the ads. Now, it's very interesting this time. Oh, move that box away. Okay. Did I do that right now? Okay, thank you very much. It'll go. It'll go. The Trump box. He always wants to be front and center. So ads this time, you know, ad wars, a lot of money, worried about Citizens United financing all these ads. Where did 140 or 160 million dollars get Jeb Bush? Not in the White House, right? So we have to wonder what all this money is for. Is it better spent on organizing door knockers, people to call, or these ads? Who are swayed by an ad? You know, these are all questions I guess I don't know the answer to, but perhaps you have some thoughts on it. Let's listen or watch. I think this is at least 2 or maybe 3 Trump ads cut together so we can kind of get a flavor of where he's going for this. And remember, Hillary Clinton far outspends Donald Trump in this campaign in terms of ads, but we not only have ads from the individual campaigns, but we have the super PACs, right? People trying to go against Hillary Clinton who are not in the Donald Trump campaign. So let's watch an example or 2 of Donald Trump.
You heard the speech, but behind the glitter lies this stark truth. In Hillary Clinton's America, things get worse. Under her dishonest plan, taxes keep rising, terrorism spreads, Washington insiders remain in control, Americans losing their jobs, homes, and hope. In Donald Trump's America, people are put back to work. Our families are safe. The American dream achievable again. Change that makes America great again.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
She's one of the wealthiest women in politics. Combined income, $30 million. Tours the world on private jets. Protected by armed guards for 30 years. But she doesn't believe in your right to keep a gun at home for self-defense.
I fully appreciate how hard life is for so many Americans today.
An out-of-touch hypocrite. She'd leave you defenseless. The NRA Political Victory Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
She'll call 911. Average response time, 11 minutes. Too late. She keeps a firearm in this safe for protection. But Hillary Clinton could take away her right to self-defense. And with Supreme Court justices, Hillary can. Don't let Hillary leave you protected with nothing but a phone. The NRA Political Victory Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Okay, I don't know if we're seeing these in Iowa. So what are the themes there? Just shout them out, or if I can get to you. What are you seeing there? I heard responses there. Yeah. Be afraid. Be very scared. They're going to take away your gun so you can't defend yourself. And this all fits in with the distrust of government, doesn't it? Because at the local level, the police are the government. I want to be able to protect myself. I don't really trust the police to do the job. Other themes here? Yes, sir. Are those ads shown in Iowa? I don't know. You know, I went to YouTube and I picked up some of the... Yeah, go. Let's get a microphone to you, sir. Yeah.
I ask because I live right across the Mississippi on the other side of the river, and I've never seen any of those in Illinois. Of course, there's very few in Illinois anyway. What's the point?
Well, that was my point. You know, you're so darn blue there in Illinois. I think Nate Silver gives Illinois to Clinton to a 98% chance. Raise your hand if you've seen any of these 3 ads. Okay, so here in Iowa, you see it in a battleground state there too. So
I think we've seen the first one. I've not seen the NRA ads at all.
Okay.
The first
you
one
have
is on all the time.
Okay, so some people have definitely seen these ads. Did we have any other themes? Be afraid, be very afraid. What is here? Yes, Martha.
Out of touch.
Out of touch. That has to do with elitism. She's in this corporate jet. Boy, she doesn't know us, does she, right? And she's never known us because how long has she been living this life? What's that? Say that again.
What does he fly around on?
I don't know. Well, a funny story about that, I was with a friend who was actually a pilot last summer before Donald Trump had declared his candidacy, and we were just took off from Iowa City, landed in the Cedar Rapids airport and taxiing around and said, okay, we're going to find another runway to get. Look out the window. Wow, it's Trump's plane. Do you think he's going to run for president? If it's plains in Iowa. yeah. Any other themes? I think you've tapped the ones that I identified. Shoo. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
I think he portrayed her as an uppity woman.
Uppity, elite, out of touch, not living the lives that we live, right? Okay. Let's get another taste of... So this is another aspect that we saw come out against Hillary Clinton after the 9/11 remembrance. And then we had this question come up, and we see some footage from the news here.
Our next president faces daunting challenges in a dangerous world. Iran promoting terrorism, North Korea threatening, ISIS on the rise, Libya and North Africa in chaos. Hillary Clinton failed every single time as Secretary of State. Now she wants to be president. Hillary Clinton doesn't have the fortitude, strength, or stamina to lead in our world. She failed as Secretary of State. Don't let her fail us again.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Okay. What do we see there? Obviously, we have her health, right? The world is an element of be afraid, be very afraid. The world is a very scary place. We need a warrior in chief. And what is this woman can't walk up some stairs? What is this woman coughing, having a coughing fit, right? Okay, let's see here.
She was in charge, but she didn't do anything, they felt.
Right, yeah. Right, and over to you, Sandra.
I think they were trying to imply weak. Beyond the health, just weak.
Just weak. You think? Cindy says it may have something to do with her being a woman. Don't know about that.
Well, they're trying to portray that.
Okay. How many here, I guess this is a sort of an impromptu clap poll here. How many think that Hillary, let me see if I can formulate this right, that Hillary Clinton is being evaluated unfairly because she's a woman? That you would take, so that being said, that you would take the same positions, the same demeanor, the same attitude, put it in a male body, and you would have much less opposition? So if I'm kind of understanding that right? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. If you can get close to the microphone. Lean in, please.
Her shouting sometimes, I'm a Hillary fan, but her shouting sometimes just irritates me. It isn't womanly, I don't think.
Why? Oh, wow. Oh, no, great observation. Whoa. Watch your back on the way out of class. Okay, she said that her shouting is disturbing and that she finds it's not very womanly in some cases. So this is what we're dealing with. What is a leader? What is womanly? And what is not womanly? And I've heard too. You probably heard this as well as a knock. Oh, when you mentioned Hillary, shrillery, right? That somehow we're not supposed to accept women doing this. You don't like anybody doing that. Okay. That's why you're a public radio listener. We're civil, right? Okay. Before time runs out, let's make sure we see this. Let's see. I've even forgotten which one this is. Let's go to... This is an interesting one I wanted to play for you because it kind of morphed into one thing. This is actually taken... And when we look at Hillary's ads here, one thing that's very interesting is, as Hans pointed out, unlike the Trump ads and unlike previous campaigns where there is a dispute about, who will grow the deficit more, who will do better for our economy, right? This is a big gray area. How do you know? Clinton's ads, her campaign, draw almost, I don't know what the ratio is, but almost always just on Donald Trump's words. Okay? So there's really not a lot in dispute here except how you interpret this. and how you see it reflecting on our country. So this is actually taken at an Iowa rally, and then I want to show you the first version of it and then how it was further processed by her campaign into another message about bullying.
What are you going to do about all this bullying? Not just because of just people who want to be mean, but mental and physical and diseases that people have that they're able to live with every day.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why that's on your mind?
I have asthma, and occasionally I've heard people talking behind my back about not wanting to be near me because I have asthma. I mean, people, it's not contagious.
That was really brave. I can't even imagine what it's like to be, a young person in today's world where that's coming at you all the time. So I do think we all have to speak up and speak out about trying to create an atmosphere where bullying is not appropriate, where it's not allowed. I really do think we need more love and kindness in our country. I think we are not treating each other with the respect and the and the care that we should show toward each other. And that's why it's important to stand up to bullies wherever they are, and why we shouldn't let anybody bully his way into the presidency. Because that is not who we are as Americans.
Okay, I misspoke. The part of it that actually draws on Trump's own words is the further process of this, and you'll see this worked into this ad. Hillary Clinton's campaign always had sort of nice titles for their ads. This one's called Bully, and you'll see parts of that, what you just saw in this ad. But also Hollywood comes in.
What, are you gonna cry now?
Don't be so gullible, McFly.
You sit down.
Sit down.
Judith, fat boy.
And I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers. She ate like a pig.
You're so stupid.
How stupid are the people of the country?
I want to see you in here again.
Get him out of here. Get out.
Come on, cry.
He's like a little
Come
baby.
on,
You gotta see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
What are you going to do about people who want to be mean and all this bullying?
Tell me a little bit more about why that's on your mind.
I have asthma, and occasionally I've heard people talking behind my back.
That was really brave. I really do think we need more love and kindness in our country. That's why it's important to stand up to bullies wherever they are, and why we shouldn't let anybody bully his way into the presidency, because that is not who we are as Americans.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
Okay, there you see. Creative heads got together to work on that. Also in the theme here of using Donald Trump's own words against him. And this really disturbed a lot of people because we respect our veterans, and John McCain, who was a POW for 5.5 years. And, well, look what the Clinton campaign did with this.
John McCain, a war hero, 5.5 years as a POW, and you call him a dummy. Is that appropriate in running for president?
Okay. He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
Do you
He's a
agree
war
with
hero.
that?
He's a war hero because he was captured.
I was in World War II in the European theater. Ultimately, I was captured after knocking out a bunker with a grenade. It was mainly hunger and cold and worrying whether the Germans were going to hurt us again. Apart from the outrage of the insult to prisoners of war, he insulted all of our military. My war is 70 years. Ago. And yesterday, he's everything I would not want to be or emulate, and I would hope we would not adulate a man like him and put him into the most precious office in this country.
Okay, there we have, wow, in terms of people drying their eyes, right? In 1 minute, right? This is not an intellectual argument, is it, in this ad, right? Anybody want to share what's going on here, what they're pulling at here? Yeah.
I'm just saying the heartstrings for sure. I mean, love of the veterans.
Yes, sir.
Well, the campaign on both sides this time seems to me is less on issues and more about feelings or what someone said. There's very little policy being talked both ways. It's just different completely.
Right, and it's I've heard it said sort of simply character. There are some elections that are character based and some that are more issue based. This has really ignored a lot of the issues. Tomorrow, for instance, we're going to be, on River to River, we're going to be looking at global warming, how the candidates' positions are on global warming, which has been discussed very little. We talked about tax policy as an issue last time, and we know, we like to make sure we concentrate on the issues. Who knows how much at this point it's making a contribution to helping people decide their votes, because we see it's sort of a character. Do you believe in the character of Hillary Clinton? Is she elite? Is she out of touch? Is she weak? Can we count on her against the big bad world? Is Donald Trump deplorable? We've got just a few minutes, so share any last questions. I can't know if I would answer them, but maybe they're just an observation.
I have an observation. It goes back to the last Obama campaign. I heard so many people say what an awful man Obama was and how he should be dead. And I thought, what has he done that is so awful? He hasn't done any crimes. The Republicans, I don't think, had enough time to really vilify him like they have with Hillary. They've been after her for decades. She's a woman, and that is very threatening to Republicans, probably more threatening than a black American.
Interesting. Well, this country did give the vote to black Americans before it gave it to women, right? So it's following in that exact procession, one of our political commentators in a show a couple of weeks ago said something, talked about this. We had maybe a caller complaining about this. And his comment, I think, really hit home was that, well, when you make history in the way Hillary Clinton may make history, you don't get there on a path of rose petals. People don't say to Rosa Parks or Hillary Clinton, here, let me spread some rose petals out for you. So nobody can say it hasn't. If Hillary Clinton, regardless of your politics, nobody can say she, and Donald Trump said it himself, she doesn't give up, right? That it hasn't been a hard slog, regardless of the outcome. Okay, unless somebody else had something to offer. Yeah, you, Carol.
Don't you think that part of the problem is Hillary has been doing this for 30 years? And any of you who have been in a position of authority, no matter what you do, you're going to get criticized.
Well, that's your experience speaking. I don't know what you've done in your professional life, but people will see that in different ways. Other people I've talked to, people who have had classified or top secret clearances, say, listen, what she did with that server was something I would have been canned for easily. So why is she being held to a different standard? Right? Go ahead, the microphone, yeah.
I just wondered if you would have a quick comment on the role of international influence on the election with WikiLeaks, with the whole innuendo that we are being somewhat influenced and controlled by other governments, and that perhaps our election is a bit up for grabs by the influence that other governments are putting on it.
Maybe some others have some observations about this. I can only tell you what I have, done in reading, preparing for my shows. It seems that more than a dozen U.S. agencies are in consensus that the hacking of the DNC was the work of the Russians, and that the data, those thousands of emails, flowed somehow from the Russian hacking to WikiLeaks to be used by Julian Assange. Now, the other question that's not clear and that the FBI has had multiple investigations about is if there is any contact between the Donald Trump campaign and the Russians. That has not been shown. But some are asking, well, if you say you're investigating Hillary Clinton or these related emails, which we don't know is in there, why aren't you saying that you're also investigating the Trump campaign for possible connections with influence from the Russian government? And of course, some will say, Donald Trump can say one thing, but we don't know, and Hillary Clinton has brought this out many times this week. If you don't release your taxes, you can say anything about your business dealings. You can say, we know he's an international businessman, right? Do we know about potential conflicts of interest? We know what he says, but we don't have it documented there. But very interesting. I'm not an authority on that, so I'm just kind of summarizing some of the things that I said. Yeah.
Do we know how much Donald Trump has spent on his own campaign from campaign finance disclosures?
I think he's up to, somebody probably knows this better, it's about 50 million of his own. I think when all is said and done, 50 or 60 million. How much did he take out of the foundation? I don't know, Martha. Anyway, I think we're one last question. Yes, sir. Let me get the microphone over to you.
How does the Clinton Foundation fit into all this?
I think the sort of the fairest evaluation that I heard was when last week I interviewed Carl Bernstein of Woodward and Bernstein fame from Watergate, and he wrote a biography of Hillary Clinton that came out in 2007, and he was not easy on Hillary Clinton in that book or in the interview. And what he said about the Clinton Foundation is, okay, this doesn't seem to be anything illegal here, but here on the one hand you have a foundation undoubtedly doing really good things in the world with its money, but then also, connected with that, you would have Bill Clinton go to where you're getting donations from the countries of, I don't know, whatever foreign country, and speaking there and getting $300,000, $500,000 for this. Now, any business person knows that's pretty hard to separate. So his idea, his conclusion was the Clinton Foundation is both something that undoubtedly does a lot of good for impoverished people in the world, but it is also a mechanism for enriching the Clintons. Now, do we have a law against that? I don't think so.
They don't take a salary from their charities. They don't take a salary. I don't know if they get money somewhere under the table, but they, but the speaking fees is what I'm saying, so that you can go. That's a pretty good salary. If I got $500,000 for standing in front of you folks, I would sing and dance until midnight. Well, thanks. If you'd like to chat a little bit afterwards, I'll be here for a few minutes. Thanks. We'll see you next week. Wait a minute. Let me say your homework. Let me repeat it. I don't have it up there. IPR Ben class. What's at stake for you in guessing the number of electoral votes for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? You'll have to have two numbers there. One number for Hillary Clinton, one number for Donald Trump. Maybe you want to put the man in Utah in there. Give him some electoral votes too. The closest, if we don't get anybody nail it, it'll be like horseshoes. The closest people. No multiple voting.
Vote early and often. Oh. Thanks, everybody.